and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. I'm your host, David Sarabian. Thank you for joining us. Today on the show, we will discuss Ben Affleck's slavery connection to his family being censored. Next, we will discuss the recent riots in Baltimore and why it has received much more news attention than the devastating earthquake in Nepal. And finally, a bill that would allow Nevada college campuses to completely ban tobacco use. Before we dive into our topics, let me introduce our panel. First, we have Alex Velto, a graduating senior in political science. Next, Jason Thompson, a graduate student in journalism and media studies. Camelot Todd, a junior in journalism and media studies. And Peter Nicholas Stefano, a junior in journalism and media studies. Thank you for being with us today. Emails from the Sony hack have recently revealed that Ben Affleck had the PBS program Finding Your Roots delete the segment that revealed his family's history of owning slaves. If it's in the past and Ben Affleck does not think slavery is acceptable, then is this something that he should have hid? Have racial tensions hit such a high point that we thought that it was necessary? Peter, what do you think?
Well, the show is about your past and it's about your ancestry, so it's ridiculous that he would want to keep that out of the show, number one. He shouldn't have wanted to, but I don't think, like I said, I don't believe it's the worst thing in the world. It's being a little bit, being a little bit of a phony and you're being dishonest. Like I said, it's not the worst thing in the world, but there's no way you should have wanted to do that. I think somebody should have talked to him about that. And also the show, which you were telling me, it was their decision to take it out, right?
After Ben Affleck told them to, yes.
Well, I think they should have had somebody speak to Ben Affleck and tell him it wasn't right. It was dishonest to put the show on like that. Not even for the reason that it's going to come out. Just as, if you want to put on a show like that, be straight on and be honest. There's nothing to hide. That was hundreds of years ago, and I think people they're worried about what people are going to think about them. And I think it was a bad decision on his part, and a bad decision on this, but let's not.
And I think you're right. Alex, you're a political science major. Do you really think racial tensions, even politically, especially with recent riots in Ferguson and Baltimore, have contributed to this, even though that this occurred before the Sony hack? Do you think this has just been something under the surface?
The kind of framing your question makes it seem like it's the tension between the races which is the issue, as opposed to one race's history of dominating another race and racism itself existing. So,
well, what other reason would you want to hide it if it wasn't to an extent embarrassing? Because
I'm not denying that. I think that there's a history of racism which is at the root of the issue. It's the fact that people, the way our society's been set up, has been dominated by kind of whiteness, and it's made it so some people have benefited, others have suffered. There are people that are stuck in cycles of, different cycles of oppression now.
He's worried how it's going to make him look. Obviously, it's a television show. People are going to see it. Yeah. So he's worried about his reputation, obviously. I just think someone should have talked to him. Someone should have counseled him, because like it is, by it's coming out that he hid it, it makes him look worse. It was just like I said, he's a nice guy. It's not the worst decision in the world, but it was a wrong decision by him and the company. He's worried about how it's going to make him look from his ancestors. This was 200 years ago, correct? Yes. I mean, I think it's crazy.
Yeah. Cam, from a public relations perspective, especially because you have a good journalism background, what do you think?
I think he should have come forth with it, just because any skeletons that a celebrity has, they will come out of the closet. It's inevitable. And this would have eventually come out. So he could have, from a PR perspective, handled it much better by saying, this is my history, but I don't support racism and I believe all people are equal. And then it wouldn't have been this great of a scandal. And it wouldn't have caused this kind of conflict. Exactly. It's just this negative press, but it's not good.
It seems like that's the solution, though. Like the implication of, oh, my family has a racist history is like $1 million donation to the ACLU, which granted is good in its own right.
It's not $1 million donation.
Doing anything.
It's the truth. It's something that happened.
Yeah.
It's not something that's some type of gift he's giving.
Which is why this is like insignificant in the greater conversation of racism, because it's only about acknowledging an injustice in your personal history without doing anything about it. So to make this a racial issue beyond
slavery,
just that.
Slavery has ended. How, if he can acknowledge that it happened, if he's not even,
really ended.
if he doesn't even have the courage to acknowledge that it happened,
Definitely
then
disagree
how
with that
then
statement.
how is it that racism still, to an extent, isn't around?
No, racism's totally around, and slavery has not ended.
Is de facto. It's not meant by law, but it's still in our society. However, Ben Affleck knows that the best way to handle this situation is to tell the truth.
Yeah.
By owning up to the mistakes of the past, we can forge a better future.
Well, Jason, what do you think? Because if he really thought that it was the truth, why didn't he just admit it? Why didn't he let the program air?
I think he should have done, if he wanted to save his career, he should have done more to protect his career.
You think this is career ending?
Oh, for sure. And he should have went after the newspapers who spread this story. I mean, it reminds me of Dave Eggers' book, The Circle, where May kind of loses her mind, goes in a coma after she found out her parents were slave owners. Because the next step is, okay, let's go into your assets. All that money you got from slavery, all this thing, that's the way now. Everything's open. We should be more free right now, right? But it could be dangerous. It could lead down to, where everyone's totally responsible for what their ancestors did, even though we are at some level still reaping the benefits of slavery in some situations.
So are you saying that his ancestors, the slaves that of his ancestors, have a case for reparations against him today?
I would say so.
Alex,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Or at least they get 40 acres and a donkey or whatever, right? They never got that and stuff. There should be some type of reparations.
I don't think reparations are the answer. Anyone who's seen the Chappelle episode of Reparations sees that the people who benefit from reparations would just be kind of larger corporations. If you were to give reparations to a group of people that have been traditionally oppressed by the system, you're going to have predatory lending on those people. You're going to have a bunch of bad ways. It would not turn out as planned. It doesn't resolve the problem. I don't think there might be a case made for reparations, but there's a case made for any person of white descendants in the United States.
Sure, that's
in the
what
past
it leads
300
to, though.
years.
Everyone will go at anyone who's in a disadvantaged place right now. The Irish, the Norwegians had,
Well-
maybe my ancestors had some Irish
You think he was
slaves.
thinking about that? You think
Well,
is that
when
what
it,
you're saying?
when it,
No,
co-
no,
well,
think
everybody,
about this,
when
but this is
when
just
it
the tip
comes
of
to
the iceberg here.
reparations,
This is just the tip
that
of the iceberg.
seems to be a discussion for another day. But right now, we have to move on to our next topic. The riots in Baltimore over the death of Freddie Gray due to injuries that took place while in police custody have dominated national news. However, in Nepal, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake has so far resulted in over 20,000 casualties, with hundreds of thousands of people left homeless by the earthquake. And agencies and the government have had difficulty reaching all of the victims, and they have responded slowly despite millions of dollars in international aid. With a devastating earthquake where hundreds of thousands are affected, why is news media focused so much on riots in Baltimore that have been stabilized instead of this devastating humanitarian crisis in Nepal?
I can
Well,
take that one for you.
Go for it, Cam.
The media, just speaking from the media's perspective, because the riots get TV viewerships watching the news program and for longer. It's so much easier. If you look at the numbers, people want to tune into what's happening in America. They want to see the violence in America. They don't want to think about a country that should be covered, but isn't because it's so far away. I'm sure half of America doesn't know.
So it's because Americans, to an extent, just care about Americans?
Yeah,
No, that's-
we're kind of like that, and the media knows that this will make them more money. It's from speaking pragmatically. They know that this will give them more money as opposed to telling international news. That's why in the last 10 to 15 years, you've seen a decrease in international news and an increase in national affairs.
Peter, you have a point?
Nepal, which is located between China and India, completely on the other side of the world, which is terrible what happened. Those riots affect that state, that city, and it affects the country. So I understand why, and people are going to be more interested in the riots, even though Nepal is a million times worse, but they're going to be interested in what's going to affect. Those riots in Baltimore are affecting other cities, correct? So I understand why the media why they're going to, they're going to be on those riots. I mean, of course.
So police corruption and violating civil rights is greater than people in Nepal suffering and
Because
dying?
no, it's not worse. That what's happening in Nepal on the other side of the world is worse, but that's not going to affect the United States citizens. Those riots in Baltimore are affecting that city, that state, and it could affect other cities, it looks like there's other riots. That's why it's in the media. That's why people are, I'm sure, are more interested in that.
I think kind of both people that have talked before have discussed why would the media, from the question you've just asked, which is are those people more important? Is that worse? From a should perspective, definitively, the riot should be covered more than what is happening in Nepal, because from any of our positions, we can do nothing about what happened in Nepal. Yeah, they
Can we
could
do anything about
Right.
what happened in Baltimore?
Let me finish.
I agree
Yes,
with you.
definitively we can, because we can focus. If we were to succumb to the type of disaster porn that the media typically portrays, which is showing an extreme act of like a bad instance that happened around the world, and then showing it to Americans, and we can literally do nothing. We can donate a few dollars to a corrupt nonprofit, or we can focus on police violence, which happens every day in the U.S., and try to petition our government, get the police to stop acting brutally towards people who are criminalized as a result of society. That's what we need to focus on as a society,
It is more
not
work.
Nepal.
Cam, you seem to be chomping at the bit here.
Okay, I'm going to say neither of those two things are more important than the other. Both of them affect people. There's people who have family over in Nepal. There's things that if you look at how our international system is constructed, something that happens in China affects the things that happen in America, just because we are their biggest buyers. So if something bad happens in their region, it's going to affect us. But that's not to say the media can't cover both equally, because racial tensions are important and they do need to be discussed, but so does international news. It needs to be a balance. And that's, as someone who goes into this field and is looking at it, I don't see that Americans have that balance, and it makes us kind of biased and think that we are the most important people at the table all the time.
But I think part of what you said is the balance. And the media, the balance doesn't exist for the rioters, for the people that are oppressed by police. The balance exists in protecting the police, taking the one side that there are thugs and looters. That's the perspective that the media is covering. It's not balanced.
That's
so
another
it's
question
framed
that I'm going to
poorly.
go on to as soon as he asks that. But part of being a journalist is being unbiased towards all situations. It's not claiming that these rioters are thugs, and it's not saying that these people in Nepal do not deserve coverage of this disaster.
But what do we do as a result of that? Like, what is the purpose of media if not to provoke an action or to enlighten for an action?
It's to enlighten. It's to inform. We're not supposed to make you do anything. That's your decision. If you want to fly out to Nepal and help those people, if you want to donate to UNICEF, that is on you. We're just, as journalists, supposed to inform you. That is our only job.
Finite amount of information. I think one type of information is more relevant to decisions we can actually make.
Well, yeah. The main question here is it getting too much coverage? Correct.
Let's get too large of a share, yes.
Well, of course, it is, and it should. I mean, it should. Just neither one is more important, but it should get more.
Neither one
coverage.
is more important, but one deserves more news coverage.
Because this again affects the United States. These riots.
So does this earthquake in Nepal. China is one of our biggest, is the biggest trading company that we work with.
Nepal is
in their realm and their region, which means that what happens there, China's going to invest money to rebuild that. That's their sphere of influence. So if something bad happens there,
I just read what the GPA per person is at 700, which shouldn't have anything to do with it, 700 a year.
GDP is different than trade.
yeah.
It seems.
So
The amount of money there, though, which shouldn't have any why we should help anybody, anyways. They don't have a good economy. It's very
China
low.
or Nepal?
No, not Nepal.
No, Nepal has an awful, but it's in China's realm of influence.
But media covers, isn't the media covers news people are interested in, correct? And I don't know that they're not covering, but like he says, I mean, these riots could affect everything that's going on here. What are you going to do about the, I don't know how much.
You can cover both.
Well, they are covering both, but they're just not covering a lot of the Nepal earthquake, I think.
I've watched the news, and I specialize on international news versus national news coverage.
Yeah.
I've done tons of essays on it. It's kind of what I want to go into.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very honest with you. The national news gets far more minutes on TV than international. You can watch anything on CBC, CNN, NBS, and Fox News. National coverage will always take up more minutes than international.
It should, though, don't you think?
But let me list. In the 1970s, it was more balanced. It was
Well-
more balanced, and Americans were more informed on what was happening in the world.
Well,
As journalists, that's supposed to be
So
our
you
job.
think it's going down?
Cam, you very much covered that it's the reporter's job to report, but isn't it the network executives, isn't it the people that run the corporation that have to make the decisions of it'll cost X amount of dollars to send a team over there, but also we know that we won't be able to make as much money off of advertisement if we have international news coverage. How much is that a factor then? Because it would seem that that is, to an extent, a greater part of this.
I think it's very much a factor, but at the same time, the AP news organization sends out to every major news organization in the United States events that are happening all over the globe. The AP, the people who do the style book, they have journalists in every part of the globe, and every time a major event happens, they send out a notification saying this earthquake happened in Nepal to your desk. So you don't even have to be in Nepal to just say for 30 seconds, there was an earthquake that killed thousands of people today. That's all you have to do, is you can report in depth on one article, but you can mention international chaos in 30 seconds. That's all it takes.
I think the media is doing that. I think the media is meeting that burden, and the kind of
I think
point of
so,
tension
too.
is, should it be more? But it doesn't seem like this information is not relevant to a majority of Americans.
So Jason, how much of this is consumer driven? We've touched on what perhaps the executive wants, what the costs are, and Cam was good enough to point out that it's the AP that can still supply this. How much of this is just really consumer based?
50%.
50%?
I don't know. There's some level of it where that you have to be good news audience too, and we have to not want to go see the Pacquiao fight, I guess, and Manning. Maybe that's the framing question on are these entertainment issues, and then the other question is I've seen other studies where people are looking for the news but they can't find it. So I don't know where it is. There might be some types of forces in the United States that don't want us to know what's going on in international politics.
You can find news. Before I came over here, you can Google anything. You could Google, you just put the word Nepal in there, and it comes up all over. It comes up all over the place. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussion for this in the future, but right now we have to take a quick break.
Think you found every hazard out here today? Think again. The spot you missed could be a killer. That spot on your skin could be skin cancer. Fact is, if you're a man over 50, you're in a group most likely to develop skin cancer, including melanoma, the kind that kills one person every hour. 1 in 5 Americans is likely to develop a form of skin cancer during their lifetime. That's why your best shot is to check for a spot. It's easy. Follow through and check your skin. It could be the save of a lifetime. Go to spotskincancer.org to find out how. A message from the American Academy of Dermatology.
I realized at that moment, these people really needed us. And I was going to make a difference, right here in my community.
Be there for your community at NationalGuard.com.
Oh, hey, bud. Where are you headed?
Just gonna hang out.
With Gary and Todd?
Yeah?
I've been meaning to ask you, is there any drinking going on in this crowd?
No?
If any of your buddies ever pressure you to take a drink, just tell them you promised your dad you wouldn't. I'd do anything to keep you safe.
Okay, I will.
I hope this is working.
I promise. Love you too, Dad.
They really do hear you. For tips on what to say, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back. A new bill would allow campuses to ban tobacco use throughout an entire Nevada college campus. Critics have stated that it is hypocritical to ban tobacco when over $100 million in taxes on tobacco contributes to the state's education fund. Is a complete ban on tobacco fair, and what other implications does this bill have, especially for UNLV? What do you think, Alex?
Not hypocritical at all. It's interesting that the most vocal proponent of this argument is Ira Hansen, who was busted for making a bunch of racist comments just before the start of this assembly term, or this legislature term. It seems like that argument logically implies that you should be drunk constantly on campus because alcohol taxes obviously contribute to education. There are
That's
tons
not
of
the argument, it's
Two
tobacco,
different
though.
subjects.
Logically, they also apply though. But
right.
given the negative externalities associated with smoking, especially with secondhand smoke, the benefits financially for the state are much higher from getting rid of smoking than they are from the marginal tax revenue, which largely comes from the casinos and people that smoke on the casinos.
But doesn't that argument presuppose that the government is going to be paying for the medical expenses?
Our government pays largely for medical expenses. It also has to, if an employee, for instance, doesn't come into work because they're sick, they're not contributing to the potential tax revenue the state will collect from payroll taxes. There are lots of other ways the state reaps revenue as a result of people being sick or people going to work. They don't go to work. The state doesn't generate revenue.
So is this just an attempt to internalize the negative externality here?
No, it's an acknowledgement that it's not hypocritical because there are financial losses from smoking. It also acknowledges, though, that largely the financial gains don't come from school. They come from the Strip, they come from downtown, they come from casinos.
Cam, what do you think?
On that whole note, I just want to clarify that the Millennium Scholarship was funded because of a lawsuit by the tobacco industry because it claimed that it wasn't aware of all the health diseases that it caused. So that's what funded the Millennium Scholarship. And they're also working on funding it in a different way. So, I mean, if we're really concerned as a population about the future of our students, having people smoke on campus is dangerous. A good example is my Aunt Betty. I wasn't particularly close with her, but she grew up around smokers since she got cancer. She never smoked, but she got cancer because of the secondhand smoke. So it is dangerous not just to the smoker, but to the people around it. So if you want to smoke, that's cool. Just don't do it around a young population that's looking to better itself.
But it would be a change on the rules. It's the current status quo right now.
Is to smoke on.
Is it allowed to smoke on campus? Yes.
It should be changed. Students, you shouldn't have to smoke on campus. That's like, we've gotten to the point where we're healthier as a society and we should just encourage that health. We shouldn't have people walking around with cigarettes. It's not 1950. We know what happens when you smoke.
We
It's
do.
just.
Jason, what do you think?
I think this is another step towards a totalitarian regime, and I think the problem isn't so much with the tobacco, because people have been using tobacco for centuries. It's the genetically modified tobacco and the way that it's processed by putting who knows what type of additives in
yes.
it. Tobacco, it could be a use of, against someone's religious purposes. If you're from South America, there's shamans that go around and use tobacco. I
Yes,
think
but
to
how
make
does this relate to the current bill?
I think that the problem, maybe they should say no genetically modified tobacco, but natural tobacco is okay.
Possible to regulate.
Organic tobacco you could smoke on campus.
Why don't we just.
Or cannabis. Smoke
Smoke.
that on campus.
The public
Yes,
health,
Peter.
the public health consequences are terrible. If the students, the majority, I think it should be up to the students. If the majority of the students at this school vote, and I think they have been a vote, and they vote they don't want smoking on campus, then there shouldn't be. That's simple. It's what the students want. And I'm pretty sure they did a vote with the students, didn't they? And I'm sure the majority of the students, the majority is 51%. If more than 51% think that there shouldn't be smoking on campus, then there shouldn't be. And plus it's two different subjects, smoking on campus and getting the money from smoking.
From
it doesn't,
being against
I think it's
smoking.
So do you think this argument that it's hypocritical is just a poor connection between the
Poor
topics
connection.
to
Yes.
distract
Yeah.
from the issue? Is it really just a red herring?
It
I
is
think
a
it's
red
a poor
herring.
connection. You hit it right in the button.
That's a red herring because the whole point the Millennium Scholarship happened was because we sued the tobacco industry for false claims.
Yeah.
And they were about health. So if we're saying students should smoke on campus because it's their right, but then have a scholarship that's funded because we know that it's unhealthy for these students,
Yeah,
I
it
just
doesn't-
feel like
It
that's.
seems like the kind of rights discourse always kind of confuses me with smoking because as much as you have the right to smoke, I have the right to not be around your smoke. So you kind of have rights that come into combat. You can no longer rely on that rights discourse. The bill itself doesn't mandate universities ban smoking. It devolves the authority to universities, colleges, to ban smoking if they so desire.
Yeah. So have a vote with the students.
So,
That's simple.
question I want to put out to the board here is, how much of an effect do you think this will have at UNLV?
Honestly, there's not
No effect.
not too many students smoke here. The only thing I've noticed recently is there was an article on the Virtual Rebel. It wasn't my own, but it was a classmate's who talked about e-cigarettes and people and how they smoke on campus. And if anything, that might this legislation might come into play with that.
That's not included. I read it. E-cigarettes aren't going to be included in that. You could still smoke the e-cigarettes on campus.
And that's,
It's not even going to be included. It's a separate issue.
yeah, and that kind of responds to this will decrease revenue because it shows that revenue is already declining because people are transitioning to e-cigarettes. It's not the ban, it's the new technology that's making it so we no longer have to use kind of genetically modified tobacco.
So another question, if there was a complete ban on tobacco, but e-cigarettes were okay, how popular do you think that would be here at
E-cigarettes?
I think
UNLV?
it's sort of ridiculous. If there's going to be a ban on one of them, there should be a ban on both of them. I really, to tell you the truth,
But the second-hand smoking concerns, scientifically as far as we know, aren't a factor when it comes to e-cigarettes like they are with regular cigarettes.
they don't know. The scientific, it hasn't been around long enough for years for them to know. They don't know.
Well, I think that's the rest of the discussion that we have for this subject. That's all we have time for today. Please share your opinions and any ideas or topics you would like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at UNLV-TV. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.